So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here after lunch. Hope you guys had a nice meal here at Insper. And also for you guys watching us at YouTube, thank you very much for also continuing with us and for being here. It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Schroeder, that's right? I speak it right, Professor? That's fine?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. So Professor Schroeder is chemical engineering at TechUnion. And he's going to speak to us a little bit about precision medicine and personalized medicine. And after that, we're going to have a nice discussion about the topic. So thank you very much. I render my word now to Professor Schroeder. Thank you for being with us. Hope you guys enjoy the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I wish I could be with you in person. Unfortunately, due to a tight schedule with my with other travel, I'll have to be in Sao Paulo next time. I've never been actually, and I very much look forward to meeting each and every person in the hall and also online in person. So I will start sharing my presentation with you, just to put everything on the map. This is where we're located. So Israel, where you can see the dots, it is a pretty long flight, I think. But I hope you all come and visit us in Israel because we have a lot to offer. The Technion, the university I'm part of, sits in the city of Haifa, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. These are the Baha'i Gardens in the city of Haifa, and we're actually looking here north. This is from south to north, and you can see here the Bay of Haifa and the city of Akko, which is an ancient city, and a lot of the antiquities that many of you know we have in Israel. Of course, the heart of the country is the city of Jerusalem, and we also have beautiful nature, Tel Aviv, which is a city that I think is 24/7. But in the south of the country, for people who like scuba diving and also just snorkeling, we have the city of Eilat. But more than all, I think we have a lot of good science and good technology, and we'd be very happy to host you in Israel. So maybe I'll just give a word of motivation. What brought me to the field when I was an undergraduate student of chemical engineering? I came across this paper by several clinicians, led by a clinician named Harrington, and they were looking at how nanoparticles, nanotechnology that was injected intravenously, actually, were they able to target cancer tumors inside the body? And I was amazed to see the results that they had. This is 2001. I was just doing my engineering studies, and I saw that the nanoparticles were capable of targeting different tumors inside the body. So what we have here, for people who may not be familiar with the scans of cancer, these are three different patients. The first patient on the top left-hand corner of your screen is a patient that has a tumor at the base of the tongue. This is a patient with breast cancer and metastasis, meaning already the spread of cancer to the lymph node. And on the right-hand side is the patient with lung cancer and metastasis in the spine and in the hip, in the bone marrow. And even though these patients actually have totally different types of tumors, cancers, when they were injected nanoparticles intravenously, meaning into their arm, the arm of the patient, the nanoparticles circulated in the blood and actually were capable of targeting the tumor site. And for me, that was amazing. And it gives huge possibilities because you can now target a medicine directly to where it's needed inside the body and reduce side effects and improve its efficacy. And this happens due to different phenomena based on the blood vessels in cancer tumors, the cells in the tumors, and many other things that we won't have time to discuss today. But from a technological perspective, this actually allowed taking medicine a very important step forward. Just if we look at nanotechnology since then till it is today, it actually has advanced a lot with more than 80 nanotechnology medicines that are already used in the clinic day in, day out. And many times, the clinicians themselves that may be using these technologies know about their advantage, but may not even know that it's a nanotechnology medicine. Just like when I buy my computer, I make sure that it has the specificities that I need, but I don't always check which chip I have inside my computer. And surely I never opened it up to check that the chip really is the one that I was told. The same also in nanomedicines. And the first nanotechnology medicine to reach the clinic is called Doxil. It's used for treating breast and ovarian cancer patients. And it's actually, even though it was approved in 1994, until today, actually nearly 600,000 ovarian and breast cancer patients use this technology for their treatment. And the reason it's so important, just as we saw in the previous slide, is that these nanoparticles, after being injected into the arm of the patient, actually circulate in the blood and accumulate in their breast cancer tumors or in their metastasis and reduce the side effects and improve the efficacy. And here I wanted to connect to my personal story. Actually, I was very fortunate to do my PhD studies with the person who invented Doxil, this nanotechnology medicine. On the left-hand side is Professor Yechezkel Barnholtz, one of my 2 PhD advisors. He invented Doxil. And I think every day, waking up and knowing that 2,000 patients actually enjoy this technology is a great feeling. And from a business perspective, actually, Doxil till today sells for almost $1 billion annually. So it's a pretty big business. And I think it did also pretty good for him personally. On the right-hand side is my second PhD advisor, also a huge entrepreneur. I'll have less time to go into his work, Joseph Kost, but he's an expert in ultrasound and actually in using ultrasound to manipulate nanotechnology in the body. What I learned from both of these amazing scientists is that you can be a great scientist, but also an entrepreneur. Both Chezi and Joseph Kost are huge entrepreneurs, constantly working between science, publishing great papers, and also publishing great papers, but also starting companies. So going back to where nanotechnology actually interfaces our lives, since the invention of Doxil, which was the first nanotechnology medicine to be approved, many other nanotechnology medicines have been approved. Some of them improve the quality of life of patients, such as Abraxane, and also improve the therapeutic outcome. Abraxane, by the way, is a $4 billion drug annually, and it just continues growing and growing. Vixius is another cancer medicine. It was approved recently, and it actually already has inside the nanoparticle and has a combination of 2 medications. So now you have what I always imagine to myself as a small tennis ball, the size about of 1/1000th a width of a hair on our head, very, very small particles circulating in the blood, carrying multiple medications and improving the therapeutic outcome. But nanoparticles can be injected, they can be inhaled, for example, for treating lung disorders. But one of the next big transformations in the field actually happened due to a company in Boston called Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. Alnylam invented a nanoparticle that has an RNA molecule inside it. So we're all very familiar today with messenger RNA. That's a long strand of RNA. Alnylam actually worked with a different kind of RNA. They used a very short sequence of RNA, which is called siRNA, short interference RNA, or silencing RNA, as many people call it. What this short RNA does, instead of encoding for a protein inside the body, it actually stops the production of proteins that are associated with disease inside the body. And the reason you need a nanoparticle or nanotechnology here is that RNA molecules are very delicate and they can be degraded inside the body. So Alnylam, what they did very, very cleverly, they took an RNA molecule, they loaded inside a nanoparticle, they protect it from being degraded, and then they inject it to patients. And the disease Alnylam actually chose to treat is called HATTR. This is a disease, a rare illness of the liver, in which a protein is actually misfolded inside the protein. So this protein is produced inside the liver, it folds improperly, and then it starts creating these amyloids. Amyloids, I always imagine them as like small pencils or small needles inside the liver. And they don't only damage the liver. After they damage the liver, they traffic to other regions of the body. They damage, for example, the nervous system and other systems inside the body. And eventually, these patients actually died. There was no treatment because there was no way until then, until Alnylam came, there was no way to stop the production of this protein in these patients. And Alnylam invented these nanoparticles with the RNA inside. They injected them to the patients, and actually, they saw a phenomenal response. In fact, the lower graph you can see here is the improvement in the quality of life of the patients that received this treatment compared to the treatment that the patients in the control group received. The treatment was so efficient that the FDA, the US Federal Drug Administration Authority, it actually stopped this trial after 18 months, saying that it's unethical to continue a trial that has such clinical significance. And then all the patients actually started receiving this treatment, meaning that the patients actually were responding so well that they needed to move all the patients, including the patients in the control arm, also to this treatment. The reason I'm telling you this is actually to show the evolution of the field of nanotechnology and medicine. And this happened December 2018. So actually just a couple of years ago. And of course, that positioned using nanotechnology for a new therapy, which I assume you all imagine are the COVID vaccine or the messenger RNA COVID vaccine. So what happened when COVID broke out, very similar nanoparticles drawn here on the left side of the screen as those that Alnylam was using. Moderna, a new company in Boston at the time, it was rather small at the time. They've been working for several years on delivery of messenger RNA, cleverly took a messenger RNA that encoded for the spike protein that's on the coronavirus. They load this messenger RNA into these nanoparticles, they inject them intravenously, and then they show actually that that they're capable of treating COVID through a vaccine effect. Here, unlike Alnylam, which shuts down the production of protein, here actually a protein is encoded and produced inside the body. And this is the second aspect of my career. And I'll just maybe just before I touch on that is these are the COVID nanoparticles. You can actually see them here, and so they look like a small sphere. The vaccine itself is, or the messenger RNA is loaded into the nanoparticle and then injected into the patients. The nanoparticles are taken up by the cells of the patients, and the messenger RNA is released from the nanoparticle, and that actually then starts a process of producing the protein inside the cells of the patient, which then induces that immunity against COVID. The particles are beautiful, around 100 nanometers in diameter, which is, again, give or take the same size of the particles that are used for treating cancer and for treating many, many other diseases. So this size actually gives many technological advantages, such as targeting cancer, better cellular uptake, and people that are interested about the science can contact me later and we can go into that. But if in general in the field, many of the systems that are used for nanotechnology in medicine are around 100 nanometers in diameter. And again, to put it into context, it's if you take a hair on your head and you divide its width by 1,000, that's approximately the size of each one of these nanoparticles. And that's why it's a real technology. There's a lot there that's used. And that's where my second stage of my career actually came. My postdoctoral advisor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology and MIT was Professor Bob Langer. I like to show these two pictures because I don't know where you are politically. So he actually got prizes from both administrations, and he's a huge scientist. Actually, Bob Langer published more than 1,200 papers, scientific papers, in the best journals around. He has more than 800 patents and more than 200 companies that he actually started. So great science can actually be connected to entrepreneurship. And he actually, when Moderna was founded, Bob Langer actually was an important founder of that company. I think he even held several percent of the company as it was founded. And of course, that did good for him. But I have to tell you that for all my mentors, besides being huge scientists, what really motivates them are the patients, being impactful. And because Bob Langer is actually so successful, the Harvard Business School ran several studies of the laboratory, what environment and what actually creates an environment where you can take science and actually make it into companies. And these case reports, which I encourage you to read and study, are phenomenal. There's one that came out in 2005, and there's one that came out several years later. They actually looked at what are the main, if you boil everything down, what makes this lab different than other labs in the world? What makes a lab both scientifically strong, but then also entrepreneurially strong? And they found 4 different aspects that are critical for a laboratory to be also one that's entrepreneurial. So one, when you come to start a scientific company, you have to have a huge idea. It has to be published in a recognizable journal, a journal that's peer-reviewed by the best scientists in the field. So we know it's a big splash. Scientifically, it's not a small step, it's a big step for science. It has to have a blocking patent so that you can protect the entrepreneurs and the investors and make sure that companies will actually have to buy this technology in order to use it, and they can't just run around it. And of course, you have to have a strong proof of concept. In the field of nanomedicine, you have to have in vivo results, meaning results in animals. And this is becoming more and more actually critical when you come to start a company. I'd like to give you just some examples in the couple minutes we have of where I've been on the entrepreneurial side and also the scientific side. Again, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to run through these examples. And what we get done, we get done, and what we don't, we can discuss also later. So the first company I became involved in actually was totally by serendipity, and it has a story behind it. Is that 2 professors were actually talking in the dental office. In fact, the daughter of one of these professors had a situation called locked jaw. Locked jaw is when you wake up in the morning. This happens many times to teenagers and young adults. They'll be brushing their teeth in the morning and their jaw remains locked open. The mouth stays locked open. And the reason is that the jaw actually moved a little bit and now is locked in the open position. And then they need to go to the clinic to release that. So as the daughter of the professor in Technion actually is on the bed, and the professor in the Hebrew University is treating, the professor of Technion asks the professor of the Hebrew University, what's going to happen now? And she said, well, I'll release the jaw, but I need to tell you that sometimes when we release the jaw, actually the cartilage that is the lubricant on the surface between the 2 bones is sometimes damaged. I can't promise anything. She's a very, very good physician, but I can't promise anything regarding your daughter. And he, a professor of tribology, which is the theory of lubrication, asks her, I think almost that can we add an ointment oil into the joint so that the joint or the cartilage is actually better protected. And she's very clever. Professor Dorit Nitzan answered him. She said, well, you know what? I know these people that work on nanotechnology. Maybe they can make a nano lubricant to put into joint. I can only imagine to myself the feeling of the daughter there listening to this discussion with her mouth locked open. But this actually started a big project for us, where we worked, Professor Chezi Bernholz, myself, Professor Dorit Nitzan, and Professor Yitzhak Etzion, 4 different disciplines, actually inventing a lubricant for treating cartilage disorders. In fact, the technology we invented, we chose a different joint inside the body. It's the knee joints, which are many times damaged. In fact, the cartilage inside the knee is many times damaged. Nearly 2% of the global population suffers from one or another disorder, cartilage disorder, that is called osteoarthritis. And our idea was to inject the particles directly into the joint of the knee and use them as a lubricant in order to reduce friction and wear and reduce the pain that the patients suffer. The engineering inside needed to have 2 constraints. One, very, very low friction. And the second is the ability to carry the body's weight. And that went into the technology. And fortunately, when we went and we tested this in the clinic, we actually saw a very strong response. This is 30 days after the treatment. Actually, 70% of our patients were still capable of running their daily life, getting in and out of a chair, climbing up and down stairs, maybe even going walking or jogging without any help. And this was phenomenal compared to the controls that were out there. This remained for 90 days. So 3 months, actually, the patients were capable. After that, we didn't continue following them, but they came back to get another dose. In fact, also what was very, very happy for me is the small graph on the left-hand side. We were looking not only at their ability to perform daily activities, but also at the amount of pain medicine that these patients were consuming. And what we learned is that they were consuming about 1/3 to 1/4 of the amount of pain medication that patients in the control group were consuming. And of course, when a disease is a chronic illness, it's very important to reduce the amount of pain medication that a patient will be consuming in order to improve their quality of life. This technology has been since sold to Sun Pharma, which is a large pharmaceutical company, which was a happy moment for us. And now they just completed a very large global study, which I have to say that during the time of COVID, running a clinical trial is extremely challenging. Patients weren't in and out, everything was different, but thankfully they were capable of completing the trial. We don't know the results yet, but I hope very much that the results are good. I'd like to give another example. I previously mentioned Alnylam, the first company to discuss. So I see there's a question in the chat. I'll be able to deal with it. Okay, it says 10 minutes left. I'll stay on time. When I mentioned Alnylam, which is the company that actually looked at the delivery of RNA for reducing the production of proteins in the liver. And we were working also in that space at the time. In fact, what RNA interference or siRNA does is if we have inside our bodies a process where DNA encodes to RNA, encodes to protein, what these short fragments of RNA can do is actually stop the production of a protein. So it's a control mechanism where if you put this small RNA molecule into cells, it will stop the production of malignant proteins. And this has huge applications, of course, in cancer and other diseases. And we actually were looking into it for treating cancer. And what we did is we invented molecules that could wrap around this RNA molecule, protect it, and then carry it into the body. We ran many experiments, synthesized different chemical molecules to wrap around the RNA, and then found those molecules that were best to create a nanoparticle around the RNA molecule and deliver it to cells. We tested it in cell culture in cancer cells called HeLa, and these particles are actually phenomenal in the way they look like. They look like an onion. Each one of these circles is actually a nanoparticle, where the round dark rings you can see on the screen are the RNA molecules inside the nanoparticle. And this gave us really great publications. The technology scientifically was very strong. It worked well in mice, actually was capable, you can see here on the right-hand side, this is a treatment mouse of treating a liver tumor. In fact, what we're doing is we're shutting down a protein inside the tumor itself, and you can see that the protein is shut down. We were very excited scientifically. However, the market was different. Our partners decided to work with a different collaborator for their clinical next steps. And the reason is that our partners actually completed a lot of safety tests that we hadn't completed at the time. I think until today that our technology was superior. However, we didn't have the data on the safety of our technology where our collaborators had. And the business decision, which was a good business decision by the CEO of the company, was to continue with the safer package at the time. Not that he thought that our technology was not good, he just said he had to move on to the clinic. And I think for himself, that was a good decision, but for us, that was pretty devastating. So I returned to Israel and I was thinking, what do we do with RNA? And then I had a very interesting discussion with friends who became partners of mine They were actually looking at shrimp, at agriculture. And what they told me is that in agriculture, that same technology or very similar that we used for treating cancer actually can be used in agriculture for stopping the propagation of a viral disease, a deadly viral disease. So to make a long story short, what we did is we addressed the need in the market where a viral disease, which until today actually curbs 30% of the global market of shrimp, we used a technology which was very effective in another field, and we brought it in to the treatment of aquaculture. And what we saw is that when we create a feed of RNA, especially engineered, the shrimp actually take up this RNA molecule and it stops the progression of a disease inside the shrimp. It needed to be engineered differently than those we use for treating cancer, because now the RNA molecule is ingested, it's taken up by the food. But it was actually extremely, extremely effective. In fact, where in the control groups, 0% of the shrimp survived a viral infection, in our treatment groups, above 90% of the shrimp actually survived. 93%, this was a trial that we ran in Thailand, and 96%, I think, or in a trial we ran in the United States. Very, very high numbers, meaning that a technology can sometimes move from one field to another and become extremely, extremely efficient. But it needed reformulation. It couldn't just be injected, because it wouldn't be valid to inject one shrimp at a time. And what we did is we created a special feed for the shrimp, and the hands here are the hands of the CEO, Shai Ufaz, Dr. Shai Ufaz, who actually led this program together with us for inventing this feed. I'll end my talk with another technology that occurred to us totally by serendipity. I was giving a talk in the Children's Hospital, in the Rambam Children's Hospital, which is in the city of Haifa, treating all the children that have cancer in the north. And a physician from the United States, a pediatric oncologist, came to give his talk. And he was discussing elephants and cancer. And this actually evolved into a totally new program or project. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but elephants actually don't get cancer. And that's pretty amazing. If you think of an animal that's 100 times greater than us in size, and actually should have, and it lives about 70 or 80 years, and if it has so many cells inside its body, 100 times greater than us, some of these cells statistically should become cancerous, but it doesn't happen. So they have to have a better control mechanism than we have. So many humans actually do get cancer. And looking actually into this question has been around in science for many, many years. It's been called Peto's paradox. How can such large creatures actually be protected from cancer? And this is Dr. Joshua Schiffman, the pediatric oncologist. We've become close friends since. He was looking into the biological question. And when I heard him, I said, you know, Josh, once this is discovered, we have to work together to invent a treatment for cancer in order to bring that way the elephants are immune to cancer into humans. And what Josh actually discovered is that it's related to a gene called P53. P53 exists in humans and in elephants. P53 is called the guardian of the genome. Actually, half of human tumors don't have, or the tumor itself shuts down the production of P53 in order to avoid this defense mechanism the body has. Unfortunately, in humans, as we age, the amount of P53 and its function declines. In elephants, it stays constant. But there's another difference between us and the elephants. But just to emphasize the importance of P53 in the last 2 minutes, actually, there are people that are born with a syndrome called the Li-Fraumeni syndrome. They're born with only one copy of P53 inside their cells. These people have 100% chance of getting cancer compared to adults, everyone sitting around us, that has 2 copies of P53 inside each one of their cells. So we have 2 copies, one from our father and one from our mother. These people that have Leaf Armini are born with only 1 copy of P53, and all of them get cancer. P53 protects cells by once a cell becomes cancerous, the P53 gene actually kills the cell and sends it to apoptosis, which is the process of P53. Not having P53 inside a cell immediately prones it to cancer. Elephants, unlike human, don't have 2 copies of P53. They actually have 40 copies of P53 in each one of their cells. And what Josh and I did is we found the copy of P53 inside the cells of the elephants that gives it the best protection against cancer. We loaded it into our nanoparticle, and then we tested it on cells. And with this, I'll finish my talk. On the left-hand side, you can see this is an osteosarcoma, a very aggressive bone cancer without the elephant nanoparticles inside it. And on the right-hand side are cancerous cells becoming round, meaning that they're dying after you add the elephant protein to them. So what we do is we actually encode for the elephant protein inside the cancerous cell. And if that wasn't clear, this is another example. This is in prostate cancer, where we actually, again, add the nanoparticles with the gene that encodes for the elephant protein, and we add it to the cancerous cells. That turns on actually that P53 mechanism, that defense mechanism, which is shut down by the cancer, and actually brings back the police car into the cancer cell and then destroys the cancer cell so it dies away. So I'll end my talk here. Just by one, thanking you for giving me the opportunity to talk in front of you, and by just wrapping up with several points. So one, I think mentors are extremely important when you come to do science and entrepreneurship. I spoke about using nanoparticles for treating osteoarthritis, a disease of the joint. I spoke about using nanotechnology for treating cancer, and also the opportunity of actually crossing over from one field to another. Thank you very much. Yeah, I can't hear anything, so.
Yeah, I asked.
Right. So,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
Perfect. So I just thank you for your talk was amazing, was really good. Thank you very much. And before we move to the round table, I would like to ask if anyone here in the audience or anyone in home has any question to Professor Schroeder. So one question here. So yeah. Let's just explain. She's gonna speak in Portuguese. I will translate it to English.
I wish I could speak. Yeah, thank you. I love hearing Portuguese, and I wish I could speak one day.
A gente viu uma evolução incrível da nanotecnologia no avanço do câncer. Eu queria saber dele em termos de perspectiva para cura de câncer.
All right, but so she's saying that we saw here a great advanced technology on nanotech and how to use that to treat cancer, and she's asking the perspective about the cancer cure, if you have any perspective about that, or if you have envisioned a way to cure cancer or to at least work more closely to cancer patients.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for the question. I think that's a very insightful question. Until now, we've been looking primarily, we in the field, I think in general, treating patients in order to lengthen their life with the tumor. I think that for many types of cancer, we'll be able to actually see that word that you said, the C word, as we say, which means cure. And the reason I believe this will be possible now is that genetic medications, which will be able to correct genes such as the P53 gene or other genes that patients may have that induce the formation of cancer, will be able to actually fix these genes inside the body or encode for a gene inside the body. So for cancer patients, I think this will be a very important century where we, decade of 10 years, where we'll see a lot of these genetic medications being used for treating patients and actually curing some of them, more and more of them. Still, I want to say this very carefully, that cancer is more than 200 types of diseases, and some of them are getting a lot of attention and also are easier to treat. And I think there we'll see the first treatments that may even cure the patients. In other areas, it may take a bit longer, but it seems in these years already we see this shift where great improvement in the treatment of patients has occurred. And a lot of this is due to nanotechnology.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone has any other question to make to Professor Schroeder? Do we have any questions on YouTube? Do you have this information? If we have, Paulo, can you check here at the, not yet. So perfect. So without any further questions, I'd like to thank Professor Schroeder. Are you going to stay for the round table? Do you have 30 more minutes or 35 more minutes? All right,
yes,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So with that, I would like to invite other people here to the conversation. So I'd like to invite Jay, so Jose from Hospital Oswaldo Cruz, which is one of the biggest hospitals here in Brazil. Professor Paulo Amaral from Insper, one of the smartest people I have ever known. So he has working with 2 Nobel Prize winners or 1 Nobel Prize winners, but he has a book on RNA, so he's one of the cleverest persons I have ever met. And Guilherme Julian from Pfizer here, so he works with real-world data evidence. So thank you very much for being here. You can join us now from the round table, and please give us a hand for. So guys, thank you very much for being here. Thank you again, Professor Schroeder. It's a pleasure to hear the talk. And I would like to bring this conversation about cancer treatment and evolution about nanotech and also RNA to the context of Brazil perspective. So of course, we see a great evolution on science and a great evolution on nanotech. But how do you guys, and Professor Avi, I think you are more than welcome to bring the Israel perspective, but what do you guys see as the perspective for the future here in Brazil? So how can we manage to get this technology and this innovation into the treatments here with our patients?
Okay. I will speak in English, even though my native language is Portuguese. So in order to communicate better with Dr. Schroeder, let's try in English. To treat cancer is a challenge because you have not only the high costs of each disease, as the professor said, more than 2,000 diseases with the same name. So cancer of what? And not only this, maybe a breast cancer might have different types and different therapeutic strategies in order to have the best outcomes. So we are dealing, when we mention cancer, we are mixing a name that has a heavy pressure in the mind. So everybody will do what they can in order to get the best treatment. And on the other hand, it's a very expensive treatment because it's not only one shot. You use drugs, you take surgery, radiotherapy, etc., for a long period of time. So the perspective on my side, managing a hospital and being a doctor, is how can we balance benefits and costs? Because patient will want anything, and the patient don't know how to evaluate by him or herself the benefit. So they will rely on a doctor to make the indication, the prescription. So on Dr. Schroeder experience, how he's seeing from the bench to the clinical side, the transfer, the translational inventing, changing the course of the disease regarding cancer. This would be my opening question.
And just to add one more question on that, if you could please introduce yourselves as well. So I just made a small introduction, but I think it's nice if you could speak a little bit about yourselves and
Okay. Jay is a nickname for Jose Marcelo, and I am a physician in radiology, and for the last 15 years, I am the managing side, beginning from managing medical groups and then managing operations and then managing business, and now a CEO of one of the main hospitals in town, which is Hospital Oswaldo Cruz, connected to the German community in town, immigrations that built the hospital 125 years ago. So that's my background. I did a master's degree and then a PhD in radiology before doing my MBA, and now I don't have any clinical activity for the past 10 years or more. Is that enough?
Perfect. Perfect. That is awesome. So thank you very much for the first talk. Does anyone wants to complement with actually to add more points about the applications of these types of treatments here in Brazil? And what do you think is the main points we have to work here on in order to get these to the patients? That's what matters.
Well, I mean, to add to that, do you want me to introduce myself first? So I'm a professor of bioengineering here at Insper. So I started just a couple of years ago. We're starting to implement more and more bio into our engineer in several levels. And before that, I did my undergrad in biology at the University of Brasilia. I did a master's degree of biochemistry at São Paulo, University of São Paulo. And then I went on to do my PhD and postdoc in Australia in Cambridge, where I stayed for about 10 years. And I finally worked in the industry for about a year. I had my own startup. And most of it was on RNA, Professor Ari. Both RNA as a target and as RNA as a therapeutic agent as well. And now my research is actually focused on using RNAs actually as therapeutic agents as well for infectious diseases. And then to add to that question, I think in terms of implementing these technologies in Brazil, we are always a bit of late adopters in that. Most of these, for example, RNA therapies, they were approved by the FDA not too long ago, actually. And a lot of them are focused on rare monogenic diseases because obviously you have a target, right? When it comes to cancer, as was emphasized, not only there are several types of cancers, the cancers themselves evolve, and inside the cancer have a lot of heterogeneity. So I think it's very difficult to find a cure in that sense because there are very few, targets which are shared by all of them. So what I think is the best strategy is actually trying to kill them and then trying to find the commonalities, which is what immunotherapy is about. So I think there is room for using RNA in immunotherapies. But as I said, I will develop this later, but I think we have to invest to stop being just late adopters of technologies being invented elsewhere.
Perfect. And just a small comment about Professor Paulo. He's now just launched a book. So he's just writing a book about RNA. So I'll make here the marketing of your
thanks
books.
for that. It's for free online. So it's fine.
Ready. Hi, Nas. Well, first of all, thank you all for the invitation. My name is Guilherme, and I am a pharmacist. After my undergrad, I did my master's in psychobiology, actually working with basic research. So I used to do experiments, I mean, animal experiments, which does not have much to do with what I do today. And from that, I started working with clinical trials, developing clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But more recently, in the last 5 years, I've been focusing on real-world evidence and real-world data. Real-world evidence is just anything but randomized clinical trials, so it's a lot. And in the last 5 years, I've been working with that. And now I'm leading Pfizer on Latin America for real-world evidence. I think that all of that point, I mean, we are discussing from, as José mentioned, from bench to clinical experience. So we have several, and actually Dr. Schroeder brought a lot of real examples that we already have, and sometimes we don't even take into account that we are already, nanotechnology is already a reality, and it's there, including Brazil. We have several of those, not all, unfortunately, of those therapies available here. And as the real world evidence and real world data perspective, once we have those available, which is one thing, once we find out and it is approved by a regulatory agency, how can we make this available to patients and improve access through data, sometimes demonstrating what's the reality here in Brazil on that niche of patients. This is one thing. And once those technologies are available, how can we measure their effectiveness in real life? How is it really working here in our reality, in SUS or no, or in the private setting, whatever. But this is one thing that I like a lot. And I think I would not add anything specifically, because there's already too much questions, because we have a lot of uncertainties, and I like a lot what Dr. José brought, that we have like cancer is not only cancer, it has name, a middle name and last name. Now we have several characteristics, and which is the beauty of it. We are discovering more and more in a way we can give the right patient the right therapy, and well, with better outcomes and potentially less toxicity and stuff like that.
So great. I think I'm going to take the last point you said about giving the right treatment to the right patient. And my next question is actually regarding this point. And please, Professor, feel free to join us here and speak as you will. We saw here different therapies for cancer and regarding different types of diseases. And why does that is characterized as personalized medicine, and what's the difference between that and a common treatment? So just for we to have the same language here, and for people at YouTube and here can know what we are talking about. So what do you guys, why can we classify this way?
Should I start? Well, just to be very quick, I'll give an example, right? So for many breast cancers, you have these classic mutations in the genes BRCA1, BRCA2, which are tumor suppressors, very important, like p53. But if you have mutations on these genes, there are some really effective therapies that act on parallel pathways, and they will be very effective, right? But the same medicine, if you don't have mutations on these genes, they don't work. So this is a clear example of one mutation in a particular gene or two genes that if you have, you know which kind of medicine to take. But when you talk about personalized medicine in a broader way, it's actually much bigger than that, right? So you have to know, for example, what's the rate of the metabolism you have for that particular drug you are taking, if you're a fast metabolizer, low metabolizer. So the doctors knowing what kind of variations or mutations you have in these genes, you can choose which drugs and which dose to use. And this is something that already happens for some cancers, like some colorectal cancers, but still it's very limited because we don't have a lot of data just making a plug about that. But anyway, guys, this is just like a very brief view on that.
Yeah, if I may, I very much agree with everything that was said before. I think that personalized medicine, not only is it better for the patient because the patient receives the right treatment, it's better for the entire system. Because today, when we do a trial and error approach where we give a patient the wrong medication, and then we learn after several months the medicine didn't work, the body of the patient is actually beaten by the treatment that they received. And then you start giving another medication. So you lose work time if the patient isn't working, they're not productive. They need a lot of care for that time. They cost a lot of money when we're treating them incorrectly. And when you treat them with a proper drug, sometimes it is more expensive, that proper drug, but then you many times gain many years of good health. Again, we're just in the beginning of this process, but where we see that a patient is actually administered the right medication, then they respond, the response is very significant. Just regarding the cost, and that was mentioned previously, and I very much agree. I think we've gone to an era where the cost of medicine is not sustainable. It won't be sustainable anymore if we consider that patients are living longer due to treatments of cancer and cardiac treatments of the heart. And now many patients are getting Alzheimer's and Parkinson's because they're very old. And how will we be able, as a system, as a community, how can we actually sustain that? And I think we need to very much think of how we reduce cost of medicines. And I think one area where we can surely change the way we actually work today, we learned around COVID. And that's the way clinical trials were run during the COVID pandemic are very different than the way clinical trials are run for any other medication. And it seems as if the world we went back to the world post-COVID, and we didn't learn that it was actually a pretty successful way to test medications, and maybe even cheaper than we do them in our current site. So I think if we look at Brazil, I would say that countries small like Brazil, like Israel, may actually be able to change the paradigm in how medicines are being tested. And by that, that's one aspect that could help reduce cost. And there are other aspects, but I think that's one that's extremely important. Yeah, thank you.
Let me connect this comment with your question. Personalized medicine could be called also precision medicine. And this might be a better name because it doesn't mix what we mean in our culture, a personalized treatment, like doing as much as we can to make patient happy. So it's not the same thing. So sometimes personalized medicine is the classic name, but precision medicine would mean better to us what we mean. And my worry about these new technologies is the pressure of costs in the whole system. And there is a dilemma here. When we think in population, what would be the best outcome of $1 million? Treat one patient or treat as much patients as we can. If we look from the population perspective, would be treating more people with the same resource would be, in my example, $1 million. But on the other side, if we see by an individual perspective, anyone may decide by him or herself how they want to spend $1 million if they have it. So this is a dilemma when we manage a healthcare system. Brazil is a huge country, and we need more basic solutions there, advanced solutions. But when we talk about São Paulo, the development in this town might be different, and then the decision may change. So this is something we need to balance when we manage the healthcare system. Nanotechnology is not the only technology available. We need to compare this solution with other solutions And most of the time, it's the improvement of the new technologies will not justify paying more. And when we see a cancer patient for a long term, there is another concept, which is the financial toxicity of the treatment. So we measure if patient is feeling sick, and this is a drug toxicity, but when the patient survive cancer, they want to live normal again. And a normal life would be what? If I had to pay from the pocket a very expensive treatment, and now what I do. And a patient with cancer sometimes will not be hireable in the same way another patient with no cancer background, because the contractor might think patient may have disease again, and financial pressure will come. So I'm bringing the more economical perspective, because I am in the clinical side, making the technology changing the situation.
May I ask a question to Guilherme to see if I can try to actually bridge both of the previous interventions? So I think there are two different things we're talking about here. So one is, for example, when you have, let's say, a medicine that was developed for very rare disease that usually is very costly because, you know, there was a lot of investment before. But it's also the common drugs, which usually, that's what I think about that is talking about as well. If you avoid using a drug that's going to cause a lot of, you know, side effects, and then delay the cure, delay the time in hospital, and so on. So precision medicine should try to fix that, right? Should cure more effectively and then reduce costs overall. So my question to Guilherme is, do you think there is a lot of space for drug development to start incorporating this more and more, so that we can also reduce the cost of drugs in general? So that, you know, these, when, let's say, more people have the DNA sequence and the doctor will have it in the prontuary there, already the sequence, do you think there is a chance to incorporate this more and more into the drug developmental process? For example, in clinical trials to stratify patients and already have a targeted audience in terms of personalized individuals, if you will? I'm not sure if it's clear what I'm trying to say.
Let me see. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong on my understanding, but it would be easier or cheaper to do the drug development system or process if we added the assumptions of precision medicine.
Yeah, for example, I'll give you one example, and I won't extend very long. So most of the drug, for example, toxicity assays, they start with primary human hepatocytes, and then you go on to, you know, animal models, and then finally you have, you know, the phase 1, and with randomized people. And again, usually one dose and then you escalate the dose, right? My point is, if you try to incorporate already information about the effect of genetic diversity early on in testing drug efficacy and toxicity, if you could speed that process up, therefore reducing the cost of drug production, and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's a hard one. Because we have, I think we have two important things: the precision, the gene, the target itself, and the diversity, as you mentioned. And can you imagine that when we are doing a phase 1, we are kind of piloting in a small population to understand if this technology works or no. Oh, yes, it's safe, first of all. And okay, let's step to phase 2. And in those phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, we try to be very homogeneous, because we are developing and understanding if the technology works or not. If we open too much and have like a higher external validity, the rest of the population, we may lose or do not understand the effect of the drug properly, because it's long-term and expensive process.
Okay, I think I will extend this later because otherwise I will monopolize it. But I'm just saying that most drugs will fail because of lack of efficacy or safety. So if you could incorporate, let's say, in your cytochrome assessment early on and things like that. You know?
Actually, I have a complement to this question, and is I think more related to Dr. J and Dr. Schroeder. And I'm sorry I have this Madonna microphone now because we don't have other microphone here. But the question is, when we are dealing with this cost and healthy dilemma and the toxicity, the financial toxicity of the treatment, what is the role that the government and that the private sector must assume in order to assure that the patient is treated with the top level treatment, but at the same time assuring the best cost related, because the government has to pay the bill for everyone in a system like us of the universal health system. And I'm not sure if that's the case of Israel, but how does that work also in Israel, Professor Schroeder? And how can we manage to have this more, to have actually more people with access to this kind of treatments?
Yeah, I think the big change that we're seeing, and I'm aware of several startups in this space, is actually the introduction of artificial intelligence and machine learning tools into not only the development of new medications, which is reducing cost, shortening the discovery time, and also improving the discovery, including one company that we're involved in. I didn't have time to present it, but also at actually the access to healthcare. So I'm aware of another Israeli company I'm not involved in, where they use actually algorithms in order to maximize the insurance money that a patient is receiving either from the government or out of pocket or from their employer, in order to make sure that they get the insurance that's best for them. And by that, they ensure that the patient will actually receive the treatments they need. In Israel, our government covers a basic package, which is pretty good. You have access to medicine for every patient, for every person in the country, including many, and this is important to say, Israel actually, even though in the news it's not always portrayed, but we actually treat hundreds of patients from the neighboring countries that we have, which are true enemies of Israel, during fighting times and at times of peace. We have actually ambulances that cross the border every day, and we treat them out of Israeli money from our government because we believe it's the right thing to do. And we treat these patients, I see them in the hospitals, and it's out of our responsibility to other people. So I say we treat the local, the population of Israel, but also many people from neighboring countries for free, totally for free, out of the government. And I agree, it's a big question, you know, how do you pay for it? And I think that one of the tools that's entering this space of better managing the cost are a lot of computational to decide one, to help in the development stage, two, and reduce cost there, two, to better select where a patient should be treated and what they should be treated with, and thereon, and of course also at the payment side. So I hope that gives another angle to the question you asked.
Perfect. And before I landed to Dr. J, actually, can you describe a little bit what is the health innovation ecosystem in Israel? How does that work? How does the government pays for innovation in health system? How does the companies work together with universities to create this innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'll say the government has one mechanism that's called the Innovation Authority, and they'll fund projects from very high risk projects in the university with no industrial partner, all the way to very heavily funded projects that will go between the academia and the industry. And they'll actually fund different mechanisms, but they'll fund from small projects of the researcher alone, larger projects that are just like an engagement between the researcher and the company, and all the way to establishing a company and then supporting also large companies that want to work on big projects with academia. So I think that entire scope, but the main money actually comes in, we need to acknowledge that. I think that the main innovation money, unfortunately, I think, even though I greatly appreciate it, is still the United States is the main driver for innovation, for new medications. So after the government gives the first push, many times, and that would be enough, let's say for the first $1 million, a couple $1 million, let's say $3 million. For the big money, many times people need to go to venture capitals in the United States. I'll say that also the European Union, by the way, also supports work that's done in Israel. But again, it's at the levels of the company of several $1 million. And they're experts in the panel that to do clinical trials. They know these clinical trials can cost sometimes 50, 60, $100 million for large clinical trials. That many times we need to go to funding bodies that are outside of Israel, also because Israel is a very small country. And that many times we, after establishing the company, will go to a US venture capital.
Perfect. So, Dr. J, if you could join this conversation talking about the Brazilian environment and the same question regarding the government do it. And I think Guilherme can also add to this conversation because you work with incorporation of some Pfizer medications. So I think we can go to this way.
Okay. If we look at a hospital like ours, we cannot pay for the risk of the academic development. So we need to develop a relationship between the clinical needs and what is being developed in the basic sciences. So the clinical side needs to indicate the ways the academic development should go in order to make the bridge, to cross the bridge. And this is a challenge because sometimes the scientist does not want to think about the market or how they will use the invention. So we need to get closer to these academic activities, and it's not mature in São Paulo, and I imagine even less mature in Brazil. This is one point. Second point is it's expensive to do the trials, and it's hard to manage because we need to control all the steps during the trial in order to show if really it's a safe technology or the efficacy that would justify paying more or bringing to the market is really confirmed. And the government has at least two roles. One is making sure the scientific evidences of the new technology is real, because there might be bias from one side or from the other side. This is one. And the other one would be what's the right price for the new technology. It's not the cost, but it's market price. And this is also something that's not mature in our country too. Not to be so long in my comment, I would mention these 2 points.
Great. And Guilherme, you that works with the incorporation of some of the medications, how do you see that searching for the right price or the right cost effect ratio into the medications that our universal health systems and also to the healthcare system as a whole?
Sure. Actually, I used to work in corporations, but now I'm just in the real world part. But in general, this is a challenge worldwide. Here in Brazil, the universal SUS, universal healthcare system, just launched a cost effectiveness threshold law and their determinations, and they said, oh, this is the amount of cost effectiveness that we consider enough or fair for. It's not the only factor for the decision-making process, as they said. It is very new, like two months ago. So we as a society are trying to understand how to deal the cost versus value of the delivery, because we have limited resources as developing countries that we are, and especially when we think of the universal healthcare system here in Brazil, we have very scarce resources, even compared to the private setting. We have almost the same amount invested in the same in each of the systems, but one covers approximately 45 million persons, and the other one at least 160, because it has a universal, everybody has the right. So this is the classic dilemma, I would say. Unfortunately, we do not have a way out. It's not simple, but we are trying as a society once more to have the best mechanisms. Here in Brazil, in the public and the private setting, we had evolved a lot because we have developed in the health technology assessment agencies in the last 10 years. Conitec was created for SUS, I think it's 2011, if I'm not mistaken, and CoSaúde in the private setting about 5 years. But the good thing is that we have a process. We did not have this process in the past years. So I think that this evolving process is kind of, in this evolving process, is kind of common to have this. Every time we'll have more and more dilemmas for certain situations, but I see this as a good evolvement sign. Nice. It's not easy.
Yeah, and just as a final question to everyone, I think, and because is fighting with me saying that the time is over, so I just have one final question to everyone, is that what is the way? So how can we manage to get together the universities, the companies, and the state to work together to bring this new medication, this new type of medicine, if you can say like that, into the public? So I'll lend to a quick comment from everyone, besides I get killed by her. So let's just a few words.
Yeah, I'll start just real quickly. I think exactly by panels like this, where you have industry and you have heads of hospital and physicians, that's the way to convince government that this is the right way. It will reduce cost and improve treatment. Thank you so much for having me.
I would add, I agree with Dr. Schroeder, and I would add, we need to have a long-term plan for healthcare. It's not a plan connected to 4 or 5 year term of one politician. It needs to be 10, 20, 30 years plan, and this will guide all the development in academia or in the industry in order to change the situation.
Well, in the opening session of this innovation series, several weaknesses of Brazil pointed out, and they have to be addressed, right? The infrastructure, training, business environment. But I think from a point of view of scientists, we really need investment, and this dependence on the US venture capital, is not only for Israel, but also in the UK and several other countries. So we have to somehow make ourselves attractive for international capital. We do already have some venture capital in Brazil, it's improving, but we have to find ourselves more attractive to international ones. And without addressing those key points that were pointed out, we won't be able to. So we have to, I think about that in the short and long term.
I would say that I would separate in the development part. We for sure need more investment in terms of science and local developments in a way. Of course, this is hard and takes a lot of time and money, but we need to start this initiative and to invest a lot in science, more in the development part, so we can have more local technologies, and those may be more cost effective or with less cost, for example. Maybe, we do not know yet. And after the development, we need, as Dr. Schroeder just mentioned, we need to have an open dialogue among all the stakeholders to have distinct and innovative agreements, negotiations for more incorporations as soon as we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much, you all. It was a great pleasure to have you guys here. Thank you, Professor Dr. Schroeder, for your lecture. It was really nice. Thank you, Dr. J. Thank you, Dr. Paulo. Thank you, Guilherme, as well, for being here. Thank you guys for watching us here and for watching us at YouTube. Please stay with us for the next section. It's going to be also related to the healthcare systems. And thank you very much to Insper for holding this event for us. So thank you very much, guys. Let's give us a hand.
Thank you very much.